Hey everybody, welcome back to Canadian DIY. I'm Jesse and today we're going to be building this woodshed right behind me. So I'm going to go over some neat tips and tricks along the way with this guy. I hope you guys learned something from it. So without further ado, let's jump in and get started.
So the design's just a basic woodshed, nothing crazy there, and the measurements changed along the way. But the biggest change I made was to slope the roof towards the rear to make the opening larger to use to get wood in and out of. Now if you're building yours with pressure treated wood like I am, make sure you get ACQ or pressure treated rated screws so that way they don't rust over time. Before you get started, make sure you have a supervisor on hand like I do. And I started with the legs on mine. Now I took some 12-foot 2x4s and I had them cut into 6-foot sections. And I was just going to screw those together to make an L. Now I'm gluing my joints with an exterior rated glue just to help hold them together a little bit longer over time so that way they don't bow apart. Then I'm attaching them with 3-inch wood screws about every foot or so. Once the leg's fully screwed together, flip it over and give the glue side a good wipe down with your finger just to get any squeeze out cleaned up. Once it's dry, nobody will know. Now we're going to start on the frame. So I got a 2x6 frame is what I'm going to build this out of. I got a 10-foot board here and I'm going to cut a 7-foot chunk out of this. Now that'll give me my length. I'm going to take that cut off piece, I'm going to cut a 21-inch chunk out of that, and that'll give me my width. Now when you're building any sort of floor like this, whether it be for a shed or a deck, you want to make sure you use the right amount of screws in your floor joists. So a quick and easy way to figure it out is take the dimension of your wood and divide it by 2. So if you're using a 2x8, it's going to be 4 screws. In my case, I've got a 2x6, so it's going to be 3 screws. That's an easy way to figure it out. So I'm just driving in some 3-inch screws into each end grain. Now for everybody that gave me grief on my garden bed video that I didn't take my tags off, this one's for you. Now just for rigidity's sake, I'm going to add a center joist on mine. Technically I'm 24 inches, so I could get away without it, but I just like it for rigidity's sake. Now if you guys are building something bigger, you're definitely going to have to add a center joist. Just make sure it's flush when you go to add it on and centered where you like it, and then go ahead and attach it with your screws. Now if you're building this on a level concrete floor, you're not going to have this problem, but I'm building this in my backyard on the ground, so I had to spread out my sawhorses to make sure that they were just inside of my corners, so that way when I rest my legs on them, they're going to be flush with the bottom of my frame. With some more of that outdoor wood glue, I'm going to go ahead and attach our leg to the inside of the frame. Now you can attach this to the outside, it doesn't really matter. I just prefer the look of it on the inside. I'm going to attach it with some 2-inch screws. Now one thing you want to make note of, even if you're attaching it to the outside, is don't put all your screws in a straight line. Kind of make a triangle diamond shape with them. It's just going to give it a lot more rigidity from being pushed and pulled on different angles, but it also might stop the wood from splitting on you if you put them all in a row. And then just go ahead and attach all 4 of the legs in the exact same manner. Glue and screw, glue and screw, glue and screw. Now I know this one's cockeyed, but I'm only driving in my first screw. I straightened it out before I added the rest, see? Now I'm gonna figure out how high I want each leg. I figured out my front ones to be about 5'8" and I put my back at 5 feet. Now that'll give me an 8-inch slope front to rear, which is plenty. I'm going to move my marks to each side and I'm going to take a straight edge and trace a line across, and that gives me my slope. Then all I have to do is go ahead and cut that off. Now you can cut this off with a handsaw, circular saw like I am, a jigsaw, whatever you have access to and whatever you feel comfortable with. If you don't want to do this, don't do it, because this thing could bind on you and kick back and all sorts of bad things could happen. So whatever you feel comfortable with. Now that I know the length of my back legs, I'm going to cut a center brace at the exact same 5-foot length, and I'm going to figure out center of the board, center of my frame, and line up my marks and attach it with 1 screw. Using a square, I'm going to make sure it's level towards the frame, and then I'm going to add the rest of my screws in the same pattern as before, just kind of keeping them all offset. So with that guy attached, now we can go and figure out our roof trusses. Now, an easy way to figure that out is take the slope of your roof. In my case, it's 8 inches. So on the bottom of my frame, I'm going to make an 8-inch mark. Now I'm going to take the exact 2x6 board that I'm going to cut my truss out of and line it up in the bottom corner. And I'm going to take the front edge and I'm going to line the bottom of the 2x6 up with my 8-inch mark. Then all I got to do is trace a line with my legs and use those as a reference and cut them out, and that gives me the exact angle for my roof trusses. Then all you got to do is just trace the one onto your next one and so on and so forth until you have them all cut out. Super simple, no math. So to attach it, I'm just going to use the same wood glue as before, rinse and repeat, and I'm going to pin it in the top corner with a 3-inch screw, front and rear. Then I'm going to go back towards the inside, and I'm going to finish attaching it with my 2-inch screws on the inside, again, just to keep the outside a lot cleaner so there's not screws everywhere visible. To attach our front piece, if you have somebody that can give you a hand, it would obviously make it a lot easier, but I was doing this by myself, so I just put a clamp there and I just rested it on the clamp. And then just like before, same thing, using a 3-inch screw to pin each corner, just making sure you don't run into the screw you put in from the side. To figure out where your back piece is going to go, it's not going to go exactly flush with the front 2x6, so just hold a scrap board up there and that'll actually set your exact angles to what you need, and then you can go ahead and attach your back piece as well. So with the basic skeleton of this guy all finished, now we can turn our attention to the floor. So I'm going to take a 5/4 by 6 deck board and I'm going to cut a whole bunch of floor pieces out of that. Back at the frame, I'm going to figure out the center of my rear spine, and I'm going to use a 1/4-inch spike that I have floating around. That's just going to be my spacer. That'll keep air flowing up between the boards and just let everything dry out if you've got any wet wood in there. I'm going to measure back 1/8 of an inch or half the width of my spacer and transfer over some measurements to my board, and then I'm going to cut it out with a jigsaw so it'll fit around there. Now, I'm not doing this exactly the safest way. I know my hand is very close to that blade, so do as I say, not as I do. Clamp it down to a work surface, whatever you can do to make that cut a lot better. I was trying to do this on camera and show as much as I could, so it was kind of awkward. But once you have the pieces both cut, slide them in and make sure you're centered with your rear spine, and then start attaching them with some 2-inch screws. Now I'm going to pin each corner 1 inch from the side and 1 inch from the end of each board. And don't forget to attach your center screws as well. Now when you're drilling this close to the edge of each board, you could run into an issue with them splitting. To alleviate that, you can either pre-drill or you can turn and burn your screw in reverse full bore until you'll see a little bit of smoke coming out. At that point, you can turn around and just run your screw in forward normally, and it cauterizes that wood and it actually won't split. Don't ask me why, it just works. So with all our floorboards screwed down, now we've come up to the ends. Now we have to notch out for our legs. So I'm just basically taking my square and a tape measure and my spacer, and I'm just grabbing measurements and transferring them over. This is the easiest way I can figure out how to do this. There's no simple magic methods. It may take you a time or two, but it's actually pretty easy. Just make sure that you're putting your measurements on the correct side of the board. It's pretty easy to get everything backwards on here, but take your time and you should get everything notched out and it fits pretty nicely. Now my very edge board is a different story, however. I've got 1 1/4 inch left over, so I'm using a 1/4 inch spacer. I need a 1-inch board. On the front of a circular saw there is a ruler, so I'm going to line my blade curve up with my 1-inch mark on my circular saw and run that 1-inch mark along the very edge of the board, and I'm just going to do a straight cut freehand and rip that 1-inch section off. If you've got a table saw, that would make it a lot easier as well. Now this one, you definitely want to make sure to burn that screw in backwards to cauterize that board so you don't split it, because it is so thin. Floor is done, onto the back. So with the exact same 5/4 by 6 deck boards, I'm going to take the same spacer that I've been using and I'm going to space up each corner, and I'm just tacking it with 1 screw all the way up. Once I've attached all my boards, I went back and finished attaching all of my screws. I just wanted to get all the boards in place real quick. Now when I made it to the very top, I actually lucked out and I was able to just put mine flat down on top of the other board with no gap, and that was the perfect height, but you may have to rip this board to fit. I actually kind of prefer the way it looked actually with the top part tight, but it should look something like this on the back side once your slope is all in place. everything should fit just right. Now all I gotta do is cut the side pieces as well to finish off the inside, and we're gonna attach those exactly the same way as the back, just space, screw, and then I came back afterwards and I finished attaching all of my screws once everything was tacked in place. For our last board, I just need to cut my angle, so I'm just going to set it in place and trace along my roof, and that gives me my exact line. Now I'm going to put an X on there because I got two different sizes, and I want to make sure I actually come back with the correct piece. And that back corner, again, same thing, burn it in so I don't blow the end of the board off. Now we need to start on our roof, so I got to attach a couple of roof trusses here. Now to figure out the angle of those is exactly the same way we figured out our roof trusses before. The only difference is these are going to be a bit shorter because they're going to fit inside. Now we got to build our roof, so I tried to come up with something that would be super simple that pretty much anybody can do. So I'm building this out of 1x6x5 fence pickets. It's also pretty cheap. Now I'm just making sure that I've got an overhang of about 1.25 inches off the edge and about 1.5 inches off each side. Now these measurements I literally pulled out of thin air. It can be whatever you guys want. On the other end, I'm going to make a mark, and then I'm going to grab that measurement and then transfer it over to the front side, and that'll give me the exact center of my truss front and back. And then I can go ahead and attach it the exact same way as before using some 3-inch screws. On the back side, you're not going to get all 3 screws, but 2 3-inch screws is going to be plenty on this guy. It's not like there's going to be a whole lot of pressure. But once you've got those trusses in place, then I'm just going to go around and use my 2-inch screws, making sure my picket is sitting exactly where I want it, and I'm just going to tack the top edges down at each truss. To fill a remaining gap at the end, I'm going to cut off a piece from another board, and I'm going to apply a big liberal blob of glue down to there to attach the end grains together, and I'm just going to screw that into place. Now I'm just going to work up my next row alternating sides. So now I'm going to put down my long board and then my short board on the other side, just to make sure that nothing goes in a row. Keep them alternating all the way up. Now each spot you're going to have a joint. You're only going to be catching half the truss with both boards, so you're definitely going to want to make sure you drill that one in backwards to make sure you don't blow the edge off of each board, because you're only catching half the truss there. Once you've made it to the edge of the roof and you've got your last board attached, I'm going to go in and add a rear screw on each one, but I'm going to make sure I add it just in front of the board right behind it so I don't risk blowing out the edge of that. That'll just hold that last board in place flat. And Slade was cutting all my lumber for me as I went to, so he was being super helpful. Now there it is. That is the basic shed. Now you can accessorize this however you want. You can add doors or a tarp to the front of it. You can add extra screws that'll hold hatchets and axes. You can even add screws on the side of it to hold marshmallow sticks, hot dog sticks, whatever you guys want. But the basic shed I think turned out really awesome. Now I happen to have some leftover 2x6, so I wanted to add a piece of trim to the front of it. So with my saw set at 45-degree angle, I actually cut out a piece of trim on the front of it, just basically like a piece of bullnose trim. And I just screwed it to the very front on the top underneath the roof. You don't have to do this. I just had the wood left over and I thought it looked good, so I did it. It would have been better had I had a piece of 2x6 to go all the way across the front of it, but whatever, I'm good with it. So, what do you think of that little piece of trim? I kind of like the way it looks. It's simple, but it's nice. Now, one thing to make mention of, guys, if you built this out of pressure treated wood like I did, do not burn the leftover cutoffs in your pit. Throw them in the garbage. The smoke will be poisonous to you. Once you got your shed wrangled back into place where it's going to live, all that's left is to load it up full of wood, stand back, and enjoy your work. So I hope you guys liked the build, the end result, and if you found anything in this video, either the whole project or just some tips and tricks out of it useful, let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.